Okay, here we go. Machinery Row. One more time. The whole idea of Machinery Row was apparently a product of the fertile mind of our mayor and the administration, who somehow hooked up with this developer down in Iowa by the name of Rodney Blackwell. And the idea was that they were going to develop this property down along the Root River, where there were some old case buildings. I think Western Printing had a building down there, and part of it was, at that time, the Azarian Marina. So that's the property they wanted to use. It's approximately 20 acres. They came up with a price that they negotiated with the sellers of $4.5 million. So the administration had a contract drawn up by an independent attorney that reflected that price and another feature which I'll get to in a moment. So the idea of the redevelopment was taken to the Redevelopment Authority, and it was explained to them that there was going to be this project for housing, shops, entertainment, etc. down on the riverfront. The Redevelopment Authority looked at it and said, well, yeah, that looks like a pretty good project. Let's take it to the Common Council and show them. So they take it to the Common Council. The Common Council sits there and reviews all the material that they're given, and they say, okay, sounds good. It was a fairly close vote, but it did pass. So they decided to give $4.5 million in loan money to the developer to buy the land from the sellers Olson, Jensen, and Azarian. Now, unbeknownst to the sellers, the Common Council, and probably the Redevelopment Authority, there was a clause in this contract, this agreement, that authorized the developer to extract a 10%, some kind of a kickback or rebate or something from the sellers, which the sellers were not aware of. That amounts to $450,000, which was then placed in an escrow account under this person's control. Now we know that the sellers were not aware of it because at least one of them went to the mayor and said, you know, this guy's trying to, nick me for 10%. And they were told, well, we're not going to do anything about that. The Common Council didn't know anything about it because it came up later on at a different time. It was a surprise that this $450,000 was taken from the selling price. So all of that money, this $450,000, goes for things such as interest payments on the loan, insurance. There was a little bit of demolition that was done, but that was never paid. Development fees, which would go back to the developer, and the $450,000 is now exhausted. So the loan is in default at this time. It's been in default for about a year, and a couple of extensions have been granted. And now the question is, what are we going to do? Are we going to go back to the taxpayers and tell them that there's now more money due on this property, things for like more taxes, some construction cost, other odds and ends? So if we were to repossess that money, or not the money, but the land, if the city were to take that land back, they would have to explain to the taxpayers what this other obligation is all about. Are they going to go to the taxpayers and say, we need more money for this project, even though it's failed? So they come up with an idea, where are we going to get this money? That's where the DNR comes in. 5 acres of land is involved, which is part of the original 20 acres in the development project. The developer is going to donate half of that land, and the city is going to buy half of that land. And the money that the city is going to use to buy their half is $470,000 in a grant from the Department of Natural Resources for riverfront property development. So, altogether you're looking at about $1 million in taxpayer money that's just sort of gone for no good purpose, really, other than the fact that now we've got land down on the riverfront, which is now off of the tax base, and it's just sitting there fallow, with all of these old buildings on it. And that's the story of Machinery Row. Okay, let's do a little recap. The taxpayers lend out $4.5 million The city helps the developer acquire $450,000 out of that $4.5 million. That disappears in expenses. The loan goes into default. Then we come up with this $470,000 grant from the DNR. So that's how you make $1 million disappear. I mean, it's taxpayer money that is like gone for nothing, not to mention all of the time and energy that's been invested by people working on this project. So keep in mind, this is just Machinery Row. The next thing coming down the pike is this convention center and arena that they're promoting. Where do you think that's going to go? Well, stay tuned. Next time we're going to talk about possible criminality involved in this project.